You are listening to the Spent the Rent podcast. And now, here's your host, Patty Rose.
Hello, I am Patty Rose. Welcome to the Spent the Rent podcast. My guest today is Devon Lawson. Devin is a candidate for the Lane Community College School Board as a director. You are currently a student at LCC, is that correct?
Correct.
So tell me about your election. When is this? This is being recorded March 28th, 2025. The election is in May, is that correct?
Yeah, May 20th.
Wow, 2 months. I am out of the loop. There is also a friend of mine I want to give a shout out before we do anything. Thomas Yutta is on the ballot. He's running for Lane Service Director. I can't remember. Anyway, if you see Thomas Yutta, he's always a good guy. Devon Lawson, tell me about your seat that you're running for. Tell me about yourself. Let's go.
Yeah, I'm a candidate for the Lane Community College Board of Education in Zone 3. I'm running against the incumbent Julie Wiesman. Zone 3 encompasses Springfield and Marcola, but everyone in Lane County votes for all these positions. Yeah, I'm a student at Lane Community College as well as high school, so I'm dual enrolled, and I'm on the Lane Community College Bond Oversight Committee, so I've gotten a good taste of the budgeting process at Lane Community College, and that's one of the big reasons why I'm running.
So you've been on the podcast in the past because you put in a lot of work to lower the voting age to 16. Tell me briefly. I want to be clear. I said this before. I never necessarily endorse that, and we're going to talk about endorsements later. But I do think that the work you put in was awesome, and I was going to see if you could briefly tell about the work that you put in on that initiative.
Of course, yeah. In 2023, I advocated for and co-wrote House Joint Resolution 20. It was a constitutional amendment to lower the voting age to 16. It had many co-sponsors. It was a hell of a lot of work to get them to co-sign onto that bill. Unfortunately, it died in committee, but it gained a lot of traction than previous legislation. So that was great. Right now, House Bill 3012 is another piece of legislation I'm helping with. I'm not taking a big part on this one this time, but it's working on lowering the voting age to 16 for school board elections.
I've been hearing that there's actually some traction with that, which is kind of
absolutely
cool. So I just think that it's interesting to see you put in a lot of work on that, and regardless, I said to you then, I was like that was really impressive because you're very young, and anyway, it's so funny that I actually wrote down, tell me about yourself. Do you play video games? Because when I realized later, because you're really young, I was like, that's going to sound like a slight. But I don't, that's what I was planning on doing Friday night. So do you play video games?
Not really.
No,
I used to. I am so busy.
Like?
Well, I used to play Call of Duty with my little brother. I played Fortnite as well. That was pretty much it.
Yeah, that's fun. Anyway, so what are your goals with running for this seat? You mentioned the budget. That's something that you were concerned about.
Yeah.
What are your goals for the seat?
Well, so I got quite a few goals actually. I'm really disappointed with the current process that the board has been taking, especially with my opponent, the incumbent on the board. A while back, there was a vacancy because State Representative Lisa Fragala was elected to the state legislature, so there was a vacancy on the LCC board, and the board basically their role was to appoint someone to fill that vacancy so that they can continue to do the work. And my opponent and quite a few other board members refused to not appoint anyone to that role, which was really disappointing. And on top of that, my opponent walked out of the meeting and then didn't come back, which was pretty sad. She tells us that the reason she did that was because she wanted voters to decide in the next election, and that she was new to the process and she was just appointed, so she didn't feel like she had the authority to do that. But she was appointed to the board, and that was part of her role, and she's not taking directive into that role. And then on top of that, there was Jesse Maldonado is one of the most qualified candidates who was on that list of folks, and she refused to appoint him, and now he's running for that seat anyway. So, yeah, it's pretty disappointing.
I hate to be this elementary, but could you explain the dynamics of how the seat, what it does? I mean, it's the Lane Community College Board, so it's the people that oversee the decisions for basically the school board of the community college. Is that
absolutely?
And you can kind of explain. There's like a few different seats, and there's a bunch of director positions that are up, and you're running for one of them against you said an incumbent. And so
Hmm.
this is again another tall task for Devon Lawson. This is a big fight. As a student, I think it's really cool to see that though, that students are even considered eligible to run, because I think they represent the voices that need to be heard on the boards. That's the point. It's about
Yeah,
having a balance of representation. That's what I think that the board should be. So,
absolutely.
but if you could explain it to me a little bit, just about what the boards do.
Of course, the LCC Board of Education is just like any school board. They're just the school board for the college. Our LCC president is just like a school board superintendent. We're just directing the policy for the college. Sometimes we'll direct the education policy as well, what we're teaching. We follow the Department of Education standards, all of that fun stuff. Board members take a big role in community colleges when it comes to advocating for legislation at the state level, especially for funding. So, aside from school boards, I think community college board members play a bigger role in the state legislature, that's for sure.
That's cool. What are your thoughts on the current administration in the White House looking to abolish the Department of Education? This is tough, but I do want to talk about how right now it's a little bit early. It's so volatile that I can't really keep up, but I have been hearing that there is ways that some things, it's not like school is going away, public school, but it's going to be really different. And I don't think that I'm going to ask you the question of what's happening because it's too much. But what do you think when you hear that the Department of Education could be abolished?
Well, from what I understand is that it already was abolished through executive order. Obviously, it can't officially be abolished without congressional action, but through executive order, it's basically become null and void. So that's really unfortunate. A lot of the powers of the Department of Education has been directed to other agencies, so like student loans and grants and stuff like that, like the Pell Grant.
That's what, yeah.
Yeah, so it's either been slashed and reduced, and then it's also been directed to the Small Business Association, like you were talking about earlier, which is really sad. Republicans like to talk about how it's bringing down the authority of big government and putting things back in the states, but really it's just
It's a changing of whose responsibility things are, because who takes credit? I mean, that's the reality. But yeah,
exactly. And I think that when we have states like Louisiana, for example, one of the worst states for education, and then we're eliminating the Department of Education federally, who's to say how worse that education's going to get? Oregon, we rely on a lot of funding from the Department of Education as well, and we're not doing great in the education sector. So how is that going to impact us? It's just really unfortunate to see, and I'm not looking forward to seeing the results of what's going to happen.
no, I'm not. I think it's almost too premature to even talk about some of it, but I think it's just alarming. I'm not somebody. I went to beauty college. I went to cosmetology school when I was 18 years old, and I've been cutting hair ever since. And with a couple breaks only, and that's it really as far as and just making stupid little podcasts. But when I think about education being abolished, the Department of Education, there's so many things that I worry about. The special needs students that are going to need, I don't know. Well, we'll see how it plays
No,
out.
I
So let's talk
absolutely,
about
yeah.
in Lane County. What do you think the capacity of a board? I mean, what are some goals if you were to win this seat? What are some goals or some things that you would like to see changed?
Well, number one is I think that the board needs to take a bigger role on setting authority on the fact that the board's directive is to lead the president, not the president lead the board. LCC's biggest problem right now is that the president has been pretty authoritarian, just like we've seen on the federal level. Our LCC president has actually in 2023, they tried to close our student health clinic. The only reason we still have it right now is because both faculty, classified staff, and students pretty much fought like hell to save it. The president was going to completely close it without bringing it to the board for a vote, and the faculty and classified staff basically forced it to bring it to the board because it is the board's directive to vote on those things. My opponent has also voted to give our president more power and to dilute the power of the board, so it's pretty concerning. And I think that community democracy is really important in that. And whether or not you know what's going on at LCC, it's still affecting you.
Yeah.
Your community, LCC, so like so many trades students go to LCC.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
a big factor. And many of my generation, Gen Z, we're one of the biggest generations now, aside from past generations who are now going in the trades. And LCC is going to be one of the biggest stepping plates for that. And so we need a community college in our community who's going to take a big step in that. And when we have a president who's trying to sidestep students and take community democracy away, it's really unfortunate. And the board needs to play a bigger role in telling the president no.
Yeah, I mean, that's obviously, you're talking at the local level. As far as
Hmm.
this podcast, I try to stay local. I try to just kind of make stuff about underrepresented. I do it a different way. I have different kinds of people on. I'm having you on because you're a voice that you continue to put out your voice and you continue to use your voice, which I commend you for. And you're a voice of the younger generation that I think people are going to have to listen to, because it's a bad situation that we find ourselves in my mind. And I worry about the authoritarianism that we're going to be seeing. And I don't even know where to begin. It's been really hard for me to do a podcast because
Yeah, I don't blame you.
I don't think that Donald Trump is a serious person. Like, I think that it's like a clown show. So anyway,
Yeah, no.
that might be illegal. That's not your race. I think it's cool that you're doing this. I think it's tough when you run against an incumbent. And so I do think that you're facing a hill to climb. What do you think about, let's talk about endorsements. I haven't been doing anything. I'm kind of at a loss. I'm a precinct committee person for the DPLC, but really inactive because I haven't attended a meeting in like 2 years. And I want to say, give me a second. I want to say one thing, though, that everybody that I've ever worked with at the DPLC has always been gracious enough to just be respectful that I pop in and out, because it's about how much stamina you have for the work that we put in to try to just energize people to vote and get involved in local civics. And so shout out to people that work at the DPLC, but you wanted to talk about endorsements, and let's talk about some people that have endorsed you first. You've had some
For
people
sure.
that you've been, I mean, I guess I'll give you the floor on that.
Yeah. I do have more endorsements than my incumbent opponent, which I think is awesome. One of the biggest names that I'm sure most folks will recognize is State Representative John Lively. Representative Lively trusts that I'll get the work done and that I'm going to advocate for the bold change that's needed for Lane Community College. I'm also endorsed by two members of LCC's Board of Education, our chair and board member Austin Fulnaggy. So I'm trusted by both the board members who are currently on there and then also State Representative John Lively, who represents us here in Springfield.
Yeah, well, John Lively's been around forever. I don't know. I don't
Yeah.
know usually why endorsements matter. You got yourself in trouble before because you were endorsing people and you changed, right? You want to talk about that a little bit? Because, I mean, I
Yeah.
guess so the DPLC did not recently, there was a meeting. I wasn't there, so I can't really speak on it. But you told me about it that they did not endorse you as a group, or did they had their recent, I didn't even go. I'm out of the loop.
You're good.
You can
Yeah,
tell the
yeah. So
story.
I fell 5 votes short for the DPLC endorsement. Just in case you don't know, for folks watching, the DPLC is the Democratic Party of Lane County. I personally have organized with the DPLC. I've worked for a lot of their candidates. I've got love for the work that the Democratic Party does locally, and just big shout out to those folks who supported me in that process. I'm just really happy with the story that resonated with so many of the Democrats that did vote for me for the endorsement, besides the 5 that just didn't vote for me, and that's okay. I'm just grounded in the work that the working class is doing. I
There's a
feel
lot of
like
cool people running
I
too. There's a lot of awesome,
absolutely.
hardworking people that are getting involved. I was looking at, before I set up for this interview, I was looking at the list of names. And, I mean, Maya Rabasa, like a lot of the people that are running in the school board seats in different areas of the area are people that I admire deeply, So it's
Yeah,
tough.
they're all great folks.
Sorry to cut you off. So you did not
No,
get an
you're good.
endorsement. You told me it was kind of, there's a lot of good people running. I don't know, which is really good to see. But it's so hard. There's Democrats are in trouble right now. I don't know. I mean, do we have time to talk about that for 2 seconds? That
Yeah,
everywhere
sure.
I turn, there's things about strategy needs to be different. And, all this just complex political science stuff that's like strategy needs to be different. And I think the reality is that it's like, can we just be honest people? Can we just talk about what our problems are and then try to solve them and see about how we can like get stuff done without too much friction? And that's where I'm like not sure if I can get down with government, because I see how the pace is slow. But I do think that these seats are important, and I think that's why it's good that when, you know, different types of people run for them, that the representation then gets to be heard from different voices. But let me get back to your stuff. You know, okay, where are we at? Let's talk about AOC, Bernie, and America's youth. It's funny that the voice of the youth is still like an 80-year-old man. But I love Bernie Sanders. Tell me what you think about what you see about what Democrats are doing as a whole.
Oh gosh, I love that AOC and Bernie Sanders are just getting out there. I mean, the Republicans who Congress people who are just not doing town halls in their congressional districts, and then for AOC and Bernie Sanders to just be like, "Hey, we'll show up, we'll do it ourselves." And to just show up in places like Oklahoma, Texas, Colorado, Arizona, in those Republican congressional districts, and just to meet with those people, that's crazy to me, because I don't think that even I ever would have thought that that's something that would be safe for a Democrat to do. I would have thought, oh gosh, why would you do that? You're wasting your time. They don't want to hear from you. No, they really do want to hear from you. They've had such big turnout, and people from all sorts of political spectrums are asking them questions, and the voters are just loving it. And AOC and Bernie Sanders are being authentic and real with the voters, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how the party is moving in that direction.
We'll see. I mean, I don't know. It's hard to keep up with everything that's happening. I do have a job, and that's why these seats that people run for, that you're running for, that's the whole point, is that people will volunteer for their service time so that people like me don't have to think about it. That's the whole point. They're complex and difficult conversations, you know? And I also watched a documentary about how America doesn't have enough clubs. Like, people aren't involved in enough clubs. It was about the book Bowling Alone. Have you ever heard of that concept by Robert Putnam?
No.
Yeah, I don't know. It was a good documentary. Anyway, as I digress, yeah. So America's youth. I'm going to be talking about that a little bit more for the next couple episodes. I've got a guest that I've been talking to. That's a good friend of mine. Was one of my students. Was a University of Oregon student a few years ago. And talking about the issues to the youth. I mean, how old are you now, Devin, if you don't mind me asking?
18.
Oh, okay. I thought you were going to... I wasn't... So you can't run for president until you're 81. I don't know. You have to be 81 at this point.
Seems like it.
I think it's 35. So you're now 18. You've been involved in politics now for about 4 or 5 years, like pretty heavily. And
since 5th grade.
it's pretty cool to see. Tell me about some of the stuff you've done over the years, some of the early stuff that you did. I mean, just because now it's pretty fun.
Yeah, for sure. Gosh, first Democratic campaign that I worked on, Peter DeFazio. Everyone was like, "Hey, you want to get started in politics? Go work for Peter DeFazio." So I volunteered on his campaign. I think I was like 11 or 12 or something. I was just sitting at my desk at home making calls to voters. I actually made the most calls out of any volunteer. Why? Because I'm like, this 11 or 12-year-old just making calls, have nothing else to do. And they offered me an internship because I made so many calls. And that's basically how it all started. So yeah,
that's pretty cool. I do think that when you were talking about lowering the voting age to 16, that you had like really just, you view your peers as being qualified for that. That, I don't know, you might be a special person. You know, that there's not very, I mean,
I feel like people like me will probably turn out to vote. I feel like folks who don't really care aren't gonna show up, you know?
Yeah, I think civic participation is really important, though. And I just think that it's such an elementary feeling conversation, because I grew up as like a, I don't know, terrified punk rock kid. But the reality is that I learned that it's just so important to be somebody that knows your neighbors, and somebody that has generalized reciprocity, where you're just like basically kind to each other. That's what I grew up with in Eugene, Oregon, that we look out for each other and we think about things logically. And it's kind of, right now, it just feels like everybody's gritting their teeth. And I don't know. I don't know if it's just, I'm glad it's not me that's the only one feeling it. I'm just a little bit concerned. So
Yeah, I'll just be forthright and say that after the election, my mental health definitely took a big decline, and I had to do lots of work on that. I actually did take a big break from politics, and it, I had to seriously consider getting into this race. Originally, I was just going to run for the Mackenzie School Board because it was just small, my community, that's where I was from, not that big of a deal, because I didn't want the politics to interfere with my mental health. But uh, folks were telling me about what was happening on the board, what my opponent was doing. I was like, as a student and as someone who is on the bond oversight committee, I can't really in good faith, allow this to continue. Like, it's
Yeah,
just kind of gross.
I think the thing that's intimidating for people to get involved is they think that it's kind of like ticky tack, boring stuff, you know. But the
Hmm.
reality is that what I'm finding is it's just you got to show up a couple times a month, and a couple times a week, sometimes, you know, for certain urgent times, you know, and sometimes more than that. But the reality is, once you get involved and know more, you're gonna want to show up more. And I want to get
Absolutely.
more. I want to get more involved myself. So hey, cheers to you for doing it. Cheers to you for stepping up. I mean, I don't know. I don't really make. I don't know if I'm going to make endorsements. When we were making this, we talked about doing this about 10 minutes before we started recording it, or whatever. But I wrote
Uh,
down, why do endorsements matter? And so, I mean, it's such a dumb question, but why do endorsements matter?
I think when you told me that, I really thought about it, and I was thinking, I tried to put myself as like someone who isn't involved in politics. And I think that the biggest reason I think endorsements matter is when I see someone who's endorsed by, for example, John Lively or the Latino Action Network. If I'm a member of the Hispanic community, or I think I really trust John Lively, I'm going to trust the candidate that is
That I
endorsed by
mean,
that
yeah,
person if I'm not
some
like
of them,
politically active.
yeah, some of them really do hold some weight, you know. And I think that it can tell something about somebody and the involvement that somebody has, you know, paid their dues and been around the scene and done stuff. I mean, I don't know. I'm involved in that community myself, but I'm so virtual, and I mean, I'm a barber, you know, so I just kind of do my job and then live my life, and I'm living in this weird virtual world with all this new digital, you know, not even feeling connected anymore. So anyway, I don't know. I don't know where there was anything there. You got me on a Friday night. So
Don't blame you.
yeah, Devon Lawson, what do you want to tell the world before we get out of here?
Get out there and vote. I mean, not everyone votes in the May elections. This election is extremely important. It's not like any election. It is an emergency.
Why do you say
Trump,
that? Okay, go ahead.
yeah, that's a great question. Trump is the reason. Our public education is under attack. The Pell Grant was supposed to fund my education, and now it's basically been slashed. So bye bye to that. I'm engaged. My fiance is Mexican American. I live with his immigrant family. We had to create a deportation safety plan. I don't think that any LCC student or anyone in general should ever have to live with that. And I want to make sure that LCC is a sanctuary, a true sanctuary campus. So if you really want to protect students and our community at large, Eugene, Springfield, definitely get out there and vote.
Yeah, it's going to be a pretty important one. There's a lot of people that I know pretty well that are on the ballot, so it'll be interesting. Hopefully, I'll be able to talk about it a little bit more. I'm just getting back into podcasting. You talked about mental health. It's just really difficult to process and just not. I mean, to know if I'm not qualified for a lot of that stuff. That's the whole reason I started this. But I think that people can get involved and can know more. So, Devon Lawson, you know, your name is a name that we'll all be hearing in the local political scene for years to come. Thank you so much, and good luck to you.
Thank you so much. Have a good night.